Okay, so today we're going to go through what we call the general equation of a conic. This is not standard form. So it looks like this. Um, and we're going to look at the cases where the b is equal to 0. So the standard or the general form that we're going to look at looks more like this. Okay, we'll talk about what would happen when b is not 0 in the second video for this section. Okay, now just by looking at this general form, we can kind of tell what we're looking at. Okay, first rule is A and C that means both cannot equal 0. Okay, so if they both equal 0, we do not have a conic section at all. We're looking at a line. Okay. In this case, when b equals 0, that means our conic section will be either up and down or left right. Now, if b ever does not equal 0, that's when things get a little interesting. Okay. So let's talk guidelines. How do you know what you're looking at? Okay. If the value of a is equal to the value of c, so if this number is like a 4 and this is a 4 as well, let me write that down. So like it looks like this. Okay. We know we're looking at a circle. They could even also be both negative. Okay. We just know that they're both equal, so we're going to eventually get to a circle. Okay. Then if A equals 0 or C equals 0. So you have one quadratic term. Okay, so something that looks like this. Okay, or something that looks like this. Okay, basically you only have one square, then you're looking at a parabola. Okay, all right, next up. If A and C are not equal, but they have the same sign. Okay, then you're looking at an ellipse. Oops, I forgot to write parabola up here. Sorry about that. Okay, so for example, like that. Notice they have the same sign, but they're not equal. Here's another one. Oops. Okay, again, that would be an ellipse. Now, if last one, if A and C are not equal and they are opposite signs, then you have a hyperbola. Okay, so something that looks like this. That would be a hyperbola. Oops, that should be a Y. Okay, so that would be a hyperbola as well. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take a general form. We're going to decide what it is and then manipulate it so it's in the appropriate general form. Now, if you remember first semester, then you should recall how to do this. We are going to use a process called completing the square. Okay. Now, you in first semester did not have to complete the square twice. You only had to do it once. This time we might have to do it twice. Okay. So we're going to go slow. I'm going to kind of remind you of what complete the square is. So don't worry about that too much. Okay. All right. Let's try one out. So first we're going to classify and write in the appropriate standard form. Okay, here we go. Okay. So first we classify. So first thing I notice is there's two squares. So we're not a parabola. Okay. Second thing I notice is that the 2 and the 4 are not equal. So we're not looking at a circle. Third thing I notice is that the 2 and the 4 are the same sign. So that means that we're looking at an ellipse. Okay. Now we have to recall what the standard form for an ellipse looks like. So let's write that down. Oops. Looks like that. Okay. All right. So now we need to make this equation look like right here, look like the thing in the red. Okay. So let's work on that. Okay. So now what we're going to do, or at least what I do, is I put all the x's together and all the y's together. And I'm going to also, while I'm moving all the x's and the y's around, what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract off the 10 from both sides, just like that. Okay? All right. So now we're going to complete the square. So remember, completing the square, okay, we want to be able to rewrite something as a binomial squared. So we're going to have to kind of manipulate it a bit. Okay, first step, we want to factor out the lead coefficient from both of these. Okay, so we're factor out of 2. I'm going to leave myself some space. You'll see why in a minute. Then we're going to factor out that positive 4. Leave myself some space. Okay. Now, when you complete the square, you want to be able to rewrite this plus something is equal to that. Okay? And, whoops, that's a minus. Okay, and remember there was this we found a little pattern. Take the middle term, divide by 2, square. So that's 4, x plus 2. And notice that this one kind of gives you the same thing, except it's going to be a minus. Oops. And you're like, oh yeah, I remember that. Just like that. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. All right, now I'm going to rewrite it again. Okay, because there's something that you kind of need to notice. So take your middle number down, divide by 2, square, bring that up. And if you can do this in your head, that's great. So the things in parentheses get replaced by their factors. But we're not quite done yet. With that line. Okay, now let's go back to this 9. You added stuff to the equation. You changed it. You brought it out of balance by adding stuff. So to keep it back in balance, you have to do the same thing to the opposite side of the equal sign. But what in fact did you add? Well, you added a 4 that's actually times a 2. So you actually added an 8. So we're a plus 8 on the opposite side of the equal sign. Then for this one, what did you add? Well, you didn't just add 4. You added 4 times 4, which is 16. Okay, we have to keep everything in balance. If you change the equation on one side, you have to do the same change on the other side of the equals. Okay, so now if I simplify that, let's see, 8 and 16 is 24, minus 10 is 14. Okay, so are we getting closer? Getting closer, getting closer. The biggest thing is it's equal to 1. So now we're going to divide everything by 14. Okay, so now I have that. Do you look closer? Hopefully the answer is yes, but it's not quite there yet. Okay. Now, the biggest problem you'll notice if you look at the standard form, we don't have a number in front of the parentheses. There's no number in front of the x minus h. There's no number other than 1, in front of y minus k. So somehow we need to fix that. Okay, so this one is actually pretty easy to fix because that's reduces. So that would be a 7. So now this one reduces too, but it doesn't reduce all the way. So how do I fix that? Well, that's an interesting question. You probably haven't thought of it before. Okay, so we need to fix that 2 sevens. So I have 2 sevens times by y minus 2 squared. I need to change that. So multiplying by 2 sevens, ask yourself this. How can I use division to my advantage? How about if I do this? Think about it. Is that the same thing? What do you think? Is that the same thing? Yeah, it is. It's going to look a little different, but it's okay. It's the same thing. Remember, division is just multiplication by a reciprocal. So instead of going one way, you just went backwards. So my final answer is and there we go. All right, so I hope that made it a little bit easier. I hope I went slow enough on the completing the square. It does get a little complicated, but I'm sure that you can do it. All right, let me know if you have questions. I'm always here as always.